This is Justice with FCB Sports Hawaii. Today I am sitting down with a veteran of MLR, a journeyman, and a former Atlanta Brave, Brian Taylor, or the B. How you doing, Brian?
Not too bad, not too bad. How about yourself, Joel?
Doing just fine, prepping for the draft and free agency, as we are both technically free agents at the moment. Um, Speaking of, you're continuing the journeyman thing, and I think that's probably one of the biggest aspects of Brian Taylor that people know. But kind of give us a brief on maybe what people don't know about Brian Taylor. Give us an intro, I guess.
Uh, Hi there. My name's Brian Taylor. I am a 6-year vet. I started in season 5 back during the pandemic of all things. So I've been at this a pretty decently long time, though not as long as certain other vets. Um, I've been on 6 teams, 7 if you count the 2 separate stints with Atlanta, 4 seasons apart to be separate teams. Um, Big media guy. Hosted multiple draft streams previous to this year. May host this year. We'll see what the schedule looks like. As of recording, we don't have the draft schedule yet, so we'll see what my level of involvement with this draft is. But also really compulsive scouter. We can talk about that later. I can get into more detail, but Um, anyone that's played with me knows 2 things. One, I am supportive of my teammates until my dying breath, and I will spend as long as I need to in order to try to get closer to a hit than I was at the start of the at bat. So, yeah, that's kind of me.
Yeah, I think that's a good summing up of at least the general look at Brian Taylor. Um, I got to know you myself in season 8. That's when I came into the league. I believe you were you had hosted the first game I had ever played in. It was a speedball game. It's where I got my nickname of Fetal Joel Justice from. It was a interesting dynamic. So you were one of the first names I knew. I believe at that time you were a Dodger, I believe.
Yeah, that
Yes, you were a
was
Dodger
the
then.
season during that FCB. I was, believe it or not, in free agency. I know. Shocking, given the journeyman title. But yeah, I was in free agency. I had just left the Diamondbacks before I had joined the Dodgers. So that's
Mm.
where I am on the timeline. We can get into the timeline of the multiple different teams I've been on at some point, should you choose to ask that question. But yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Um, for me, yeah, I just kind of give that introduction how I know you. So yeah, that speedball game, that FCB year, I think you even had poked me on some scouting business for the Dodgers. I believe you guys ended up picking Dildo as your pitcher that year. I ended up going to the Houston Astros. Well, Colt 45 is actually in MLR. My apologies. Um,
yeah,
I guess to
we
kind of
actually picked up 2 pitchers in that draft. Palfo Salvi, who I think is still the closer out in LA, and then the player formerly known as Dildo. I can't remember off the top of my head what he changed his name to, but I remember it was recent enough that you could probably find it in the newsroom channel, should you be so interested. Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
I think he just changed it. I remember seeing that post. I guess to kind dive into things, I guess, right away. So you find MLR during the pandemic. How exactly does that happen? What brings you to the league?
this is a really funny story. I don't know how funny other people in the community that have been in it a long time and know the particular person that helped me get involved in the league. Uh, I don't know if they would find this particularly funny, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. So I'm in a different Discord server for a YouTuber that I liked, and out of the blue, someone else in the server goes off on this rant about this weird place called MLR and how they are mean and they suck. and they're just overall just a really bad person. And I'm like, what is this fake baseball nonsense they're talking about? So, despite this incredibly toxic rant from this person that I would later come to find out was also just a really bad person in this community and in other communities, and I will refrain from any other details, um, because there's no need to keep bringing that particular person up. Um, I end up joining the community as a result of whatever that was, and I like to think I was the lone positive that came out of that situation, and that was about March of 2020, and we all know what happened in March of 2020. So it was the perfect time for me to not have anything to do and be active in fake baseball. And then after joining partway through FCB, so I didn't get a full season, uh, got drafted to Atlanta, and the rest is history.
Yeah, yeah. So um, that's interesting. I was kind of in a similar boat. I think technically for me it was like 2022, if I'm remembering correctly. It might have been 21. But mine was getting out of a less busy college schedule, and it was still kind of COVID, kind of not. So that's kind of similar boat. Superbone of Cleveland is who got me over here. So I kind of have a semi similar story of just someone chatting about something I was interested in it. Um, but yeah, so you get drafted to Atlanta. You're a pitcher who, interestingly enough, got two plate appearances, including a single during said plate appearance as a pitcher for Atlanta. Um, let's go through that first season. What was that like for you?
So first season was a bit of a whirlwind. So season five, there was a little bit less of an established bureaucracy around the league, and so when my GM at the time, who I believe is still on the who retired and then came back, is I believe still on the Mariners. Uh, Jeff Gary, if you're out there, love you, buddy. Um, he needed to step away due to real life circumstances. Um, None of the other pre-established captains, because at that point I had been promoted to captain. I was the MILR GM for the team because no one else volunteered. Um, at that point, MILR was actually tied to major league teams, so every major league team had to have a minor league GM tied to their affiliate. So I was that. And then when none of the other captains at that point stepped up to take on the GM mantle, I said, sure, why not? And at that point, there was no like outside MLR like league vetting process. So I just kind of became GM. And at that point, I became a PhDM. And that would be the reason why I have plate appearances because I became a PhDM like session 10, session 11, somewhere around that general range of late season. Uh, so yeah, kind of a
Mhm.
weird stat line, but still an interesting season nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. Trying to kind of get a rough idea of how you guys did that year.
We went 8 and
So
8 and got
just kind of
eliminated from the playoffs in session 16.
it looks like the thing at least is showing 7 and 9
Ah, seven.
for
It
season
was
5
somewhere
actually.
around
Yeah.
like middle of the road, and we got eliminated session 16. That part I remember is burned into my memory
Mm.
because that sucked.
Also interesting enough, Philadelphia Phillies struggling that year, 6 and 10. But that was kind of during their down years, and that was a good Oakland Athletic year.
Yeah, that season five
So
A's
10 and
team were
6 year
really
for
good.
them. Uh,
Uh, at that point, I don't know if this is a story that most people that are going to be listening to this podcast are aware of, but the great Anaheim at that point Los Angeles Angels experiment of season five. Um, Basically, the Angels drafted a player, one of my college teammates, in the top 10, and they decided, hey, with the minor league system that we have, we're just going to put this active rookie in the minors and never play them in the majors as an experiment. And then word got out because they were keeping it a secret from them. So he requested a trade, ended up in Oakland, and sort of helped fuel a really good Oakland team to become even better. And now, when they went on that, I think, did they go all the? They went to the Paper Cup. I don't remember if they won the Paper Cup that year. Did they?
They've never won the Paper Cup. They have the second most appearances and all losses.
Man,
They are the Baltimore. They are the Buffalo Bills of fake baseball. It's kind of rough in that regard.
yeah.
um,
I may or may not be reason for one of those, but we'll get to that later on in the podcast once we get to season 8.
yeah, for sure. So season 6, you are pitching at a lower amount, though, of course. Um, you're doing some hitting, but you've taken over this GMing role. What's season 6 looking like for you guys?
So season 6 is, believe it or not, where you see the first team change of my career. Halfway through season 6, uh, during this time in my career, I had a whole bunch of in real life stuff going on. I was not in a very stable spot, and so something happened. It was a trade negotiation that just kind of made me realize I am I'm desperately realizing that I am not cut out to be a GM right now, and I need to stop being a GM as fast as I can. And so I decided I was stepping down and told the league, and they found an outside candidate. And once they found an outside candidate, I pretty much had myself traded to try and allow that outside GM to create their own vision for the roster outside of me. And so I ended up in Pittsburgh, where I played with the Pirates for the next half of the season. And that's where most of my pitching innings come from. But yeah, still love the Pirates. A lot of fun times over there in Pittsburgh. Love Weller. Weller may or may not hear this podcast. I don't know how many of the Pirates are particularly active these days. But shout out the Pirates. Lovely group of people. They're always fun.
And it looks like they were an A8 team that year. And
Uh,
your Atlanta Braves actually ended up clinching the wild card,
yeah, powered by the
which halfling.
pitcher they ended up trading me for, Herb Sessions. He ended up having a really good year for them the rest of the way. And they, or after I left, they kind of went on a superheater to find their way into the wild card, which was really nice to see for me
Mm,
that I stepped aside to try to let a new GM take over, and then they ended up having success, which was a
yeah,
little bit redeeming for me to see.
sure. And we just kind of following the trends of what's going on in the league too. It looks like we had the Philadelphia Phillies come back from a bad year. They go 12-4. I believe this was their cup year, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have that pulled up on my end. Uh, but yeah, we got Cardinals who
No,
have had
they
some
only
recent.
won season 1, season 2, so that wouldn't be their cup year.
Gotcha. Okay, because that we had an interesting batch of teams in the playoffs. I mean, Padres, Rockies, coming off a bad year in current MLR, but before that they were the best team in the league, and that year they had the second best record. At 11-5, just besting the 10-6 Dodgers. Really interesting year to look at. Um, I guess we should probably jump into season 7 because this is going to be where your true, like, I guess, journeyman kind of starts. Um,
Yes. So season 7,
we're
after season 6 was the
still
first year that I actually declared free agency. Ended up leaving Pittsburgh. Ended up signing with the Mets. Uh, Started the season off as their closer. That was a really fun Mets squad that I ended up on. Couple of teammates from the other league, MLM, that I teamed up with over there. Um, but after some, once again, in real life issues that sort of caused me to realize that maybe I was putting a little bit too much pressure on myself and I needed to step back into a different situation. I asked for a trade out of New York and ended up in Arizona. and as a result of the trade, I switched from pitcher to hitter. So I have half a season of pitcher stats and half a season of hitter stats in season 7. Season 7 was also when I was really good in MILR, and this was at the point now where MILR is fully separate. No, no, this was still affiliated with teams because yeah, at that point after the trade, I ended up on the Snake Juice, which was Brewers and Diamondbacks, and then we ended up going on a run to the MILR championship, which was really fun. I don't want to talk about how
Um,
that championship game ended, but it was a fun run.
yeah,
I think I was like
it
second or third in MILR MVP votes that year.
happens. Um, oh gosh, I am getting a slight delay on my end, but I was just looking at your hitting stats from that year, for that portion. Mm, Not your best year. It's
No, it was not.
actually by far your worst year.
But
309
you know what? The
DPA, but you
MILR
also had
stats make up
small
for it.
sample
The MILR hitting
size.
stats are significantly better.
Yeah, and your pitching that year was below 4 ERA. So I mean, I think in MLR that's still pretty solid. The offensive environment is so much higher. I mean, your DBF was 9, but like season 5, you had a substantially higher DBF, and your ERA was worse. So it just kind of varies. But yeah, I
Yeah,
would say your pitching that season was pretty solid, all things considered. Especially like you
yeah,
said, you were kind of dealing with some stuff. It can be hard to focus on the game.
definitely.
Um, so let me check out this year. Sorry, my computer on my end is being very slow for this interview. Um, Interesting year for you. Doing that trade the year before, coming in your first like proper uh, season is coming up. At least that's kind of what it feels like to me. Is it's your first proper season going to season 8 with the Dodgers, who the year prior in season 7 did not do well. They were 5-11. Um, so you're coming to a team that struggled the year prior, and let's go through that free agency process. What made you end up deciding to go to the Dodgers that next year?
Well, after season 7, I was kind of getting tired of the chaos. I had been on 4 different teams over 2 seasons, and I was just kind of looking for a spot where, at this point things have started to settle for me personally. So I'm trying to find a spot where I can, you know, be of use. My experience with a whole bunch of different teams has kind of, at this point, given me a different perspective than most people. So I was trying to, find some level of being helpful in the game, and I talked to a whole bunch of different teams at that point, but the Dodgers provided an interesting situation where it was a team that had at this point a new GM in Dutch Boggs, um, but still had a fairly cohesive core. Um, but they had been around for a little bit. Things were starting to get a little stale, so they needed to shake things up a bit. At this point, they had traded down from the fourth overall pick in that draft and got a whole bunch of picks from Oakland, who ended up drafting person you guys probably all know in Teddy Bigstick with that pick. And so,
Yeah, FCB teammate.
as a result of that, things were sort of looking for a big draft. And I wanted to, be of use. Plus, a major factor on that team, Gino Scaramucci, shout out Mooch, was someone I had played with in the other league and was someone that I knew in his system, his scouting system. I thought I could succeed. So that's where I ended up. I ended up helping a fair bit with the draft scouting, at least with the like draft day stuff. Ended up picking a fairly quality class, if you ask me. We picked Palfo Salvi, who's at this point, I believe, still the closer of the Dodgers. Um, Jimmy Payne, now formerly the White Sox GM, and season 8 Cy Young winner, spoilers, Dildo, as well
And Rookie of
as
the Year.
another, also Rookie of the Year. I mean, if he won Cy Young, it'd be hard to not win Rookie of the Year, right?
Oh, for sure. But we gotta tip the cap both ways.
And then also Robert Glasses, who last only because of he was the last pick of that four. But between those four plus the existing core, we were able to really use those four plus myself to really spark that ship. Because the Dodgers had won the championship right before I got in back in season 4, and still had a lot of that championship pedigree still around. And well, as you may see in your notes, the Dodgers not only had a great regular season, but went on a little bit of a run in the playoffs. Little bit,
Yeah, for
maybe
sure.
being a
They.
slight under exaggeration. We may
Yeah,
or
I
may
mean
not
they
have won
were
the paper
a
cups.
12-4 team. Yeah, you guys powered through 12-4. Took down the 12-4 Oakland A's that had absolutely no nothing to do with that year in controversy. Um,
Nope, nothing controversial
but
happened in season 8. There is no reason for me to have
not
an
at all.
asterisk next to my ring. Nope, nothing happened. Nothing notable happened. We don't need to talk about anything that happened in season 8 because it was such a boring season.
I guess to tote my own cap, I was on the Houston Colt 45s that year. That went 11-5 in the wild card, and I want to say we lost our first playoff game. Um, I did not help that team. I was one of the worst players in the league that year. But yeah, season 8 is really interesting to look back on, especially from like a record standpoint. There's a lot of teams that just led to there also being a lot of teams that did poorly, because other teams just did super well. I mean, we had multiple teams with only 4 wins, a ton of teams below 7 wins. It's kind of insane. I would say that season 8, like just at a broad picture, is one of the more extremes of the records that were kind of going on. There wasn't a lot of like 8-8 teams running around that year. Um,
Right, there was like 8 different teams with at least 10 wins, if I'm looking at my
it
notes
was
correctly.
it was insane. And then you look at the next year, and there were only 4 teams that had more than 10 wins. But we can get into, or yeah, was it only 4? I don't know. It wasn't a lot. It was definitely a change. There was a lot more 8-8 like teams, although there's a lot more like teams that only had 6 wins that year. Um, so we're going into season 9 now. You're
Actually,
fresh off a
before we get
paper
into season
cup.
9, if I hope you don't mind me interrupting for 2 moments, because there's
Oh, you're
two
good.
beats that I want to
Yeah,
hit
you're good.
before we get to
For
the
sure.
actual season 9. The season 8
Yeah, talk.
paper cup um, happened during
Oh,
a
yes, I should give that
very
more time.
boring time during the league. Nothing notable was happening at that point, but it was happening in and around the 4th of July. Um, Funny part was on the 4th of July that evening, I was actually up to bat. Um, at this point, we were down 5-0 to Oakland. Uh, I had spent arguably too much time trying to scout this particular at bat because at this point, when you're down 5-0 in the championship game, you're looking for any way possible to try and get rid of this. But we had managed to get 2 runners on. I'm up. I am just sitting there staring at the multiple sheets I have in front of me. I'm just trying to find a way, trying to find a way. I think I have something. I wait, I wait. I get a little bit of confirmation from my teammates. I'm like, you know what? Before I go off and see the fireworks, I'm just gonna send the swing so I don't auto. Um, So I just send the swing off. 5 seconds later, ping and game discussion. I hit a homer. That game now becomes 5-3. And I don't remember what the final score of that game ended up being, but I don't think the A's scored very many runs after that point, and the Dodgers did. I think we scored like two or three more runs on July 4th and ended up, you know, taking the win out from there. So that was really fun. Uh, notable, very like if I had to pick a moment in terms of gameplay that was like my most notable, it would be breaking that shutout for current A's GM 6 in the paper cup to eventually go on to win. Sort of a peak fake baseball moment for me. That was very fun. And then the second thing that I want to talk about is actually leading up to the season nine, uh, particularly the season nine draft. This draft I got very hands on with to the point where I
Hmm.
did like 5 streams on the 5 days leading up to the draft, including a like 10-hour draft stream that I hosted all of.
I remember that one.
Um, so I was very hands-on with a lot of the coverage. I think that's the most extensive like draft coverage the league has seen. Um, you can ask some of
It's a
the
good draft
season
class.
nine draft. Oh, the season nine draft class is great. I mean, that draft class
Yeah,
ended
I
up
mean,
giving us the top five podcast. Shout out the top five
yeah.
podcast. Um,
Uh,
those guys are great. Though I think all of those guys ended up on my draft coverage at one point or another. I think including Griff,
oh, I imagine
who
so.
is not actually a vocal member of the top five podcast, but is a member constantly in spirit. Shout out Griff. I don't have a picture of Griff that I can wave on screen like Dayman does for the pods, but shout out Griff, always in our hearts. But yeah, those were two like if I had to pick out my two favorite moments for fake baseball, my on-field one would be that homer in the paper cup, and my off-field one would be hosting those draft streams. Even though that was during my finals week, and I probably shouldn't have done that. Just looking back, I could have probably spent that time studying, but no, I spent that time streaming MLR, and not even actual
Yeah,
games, draft coverage. But it was fun. We had a good time.
think I was working at the hospital when you did that stream, and I was live streaming fake baseball draft in our respiratory therapy department, and I felt very weird, but I wanted to follow that draft class. It was a very interesting group. A few of them are are LAMs now, which is always cool.
Shout out Damon and
I
Stupido.
think, oh yeah, some of the better LAMs out there. I'll
I mean,
release my list of LAM rankings later.
that's a very
Uh,
short list. There's only three. Like,
Hey,
how
I
long
can
of an
still
article
rank
is that going
3.
to be?
Hey, I could probably get 3 pages out of it.
I don't doubt that.
Um, so we get into season 9. You signed with Philadelphia Phillies, who outside of a couple down years have basically spent the entirety of MLR being a presence. They're in the playoffs almost every year, it feels like. Um, we can touch on how the season ended. But what made that decision? I know you said you had a bigger part of that draft as well. So, you're going into there, you're more aware of the class, which I would think would make you more beneficial to teams, and you end up knocking on Philadelphia's door.
So here's the story. Me and Petra had been friends for a pretty good while at this point. Um, at this point, because I think at because I was an MLN GM also during that like season 7, season 8 range. For a good like 2.5 seasons over there. Me and Petra had been friends to the point where we kept trying to play with each other on the teams that we GM'd, but neither of us ended up signing with the other. for to the point where it was like a multiple years long thing where we tried to end up on the same team and it just never lined up. And season 9, it was at a point where I just won a paper cup. I'm I was kind of very emotionally involved in that team. I kind of wanted a team where I can just chill, play with a bunch of people that are also as active. I don't need to try to force myself into more of like a leadership role on the roster. I can just kind of relax, be myself, and just contribute relaxedly to make up a word. And it was like at this point, because the season 8 was, I believe, the first year that Petra was GM in Philly, and she went all out in free agency, got a whole bunch of people, and then season 8, Philly didn't do great. So now season 9 comes around, and now Petra's trying to figure it all out. It works out where I'm kind of in a spot where I'm down to go to Philly. I end up heading to Philly. A couple other people ended up heading to Philly. Another strong year for Philly in free agency. Raj was a part of that free agent class. Uh, I forget who else was a part
Former
of that.
teammate of mine.
Yes, former teammate of Joel and me. Uh,
Yeah, he was a Colt 45. He was the round one pick that year.
I forget
Pick up
what
in free agency as well.
the rest of the free agency class was, but I remember it was notable. Like we got like 4 or 5 people to show up to Philly through free agency that year. And then we had a pretty good draft. We brought in De'Aaron Taylor, which was funny having two people with the last name Taylor on the team. At least it was funny to me. Um, and also this random guy, you may not know him. He's sort of underground, not really super active. Shock Banana. You may not have heard of him.
Oh, oh,
Uh,
I've heard of him.
I was trying to play it cool for a second to try and throw you off, but we got
No,
into I actually
I'm
wasn't
looking
involved in the
at
draft
this.
for them, which is kind of funny. I was spent
Mm,
all that time invested in the draft class, and I was not a part of the draft room at all, which was fine by me after season 8. But just kind of funny that I was the most involved in that class particularly, and I was not a part of the draft room. But we ended up getting
and
shocked and make the way back to the playoffs again for Philly, so that was fun. Way the playoffs
yeah,
ended
wild
wasn't
card.
fun, but we made the playoffs.
Ye- Yeah, and it was an interesting team. I mean, I'm looking at Mr. Plow was a co-GM that year. Chalk and Raj were quickly captains for the team. Um, yeah, just to name off a couple names. I mean, this pitching staff, we've got Tequila Sunrise, who had a pretty decent year. I mean, 35 innings, 3 ERA. Definitely one of the top pitchers of the team there. But then you had two great, um, it looks like relievers, just based on their innings. Um, and Tasker Morris and Jericho Styles that year, they were both sub. One was two flat, and one was a 2.57 ERA. Both did really well. Um, 17 innings combined of sub 2.6 ERA is fantastic. You guys' offense was a little more um, sporadic, but there were definitely some major highlights. I mean, DCM, Dakota, Carolina, Montana. Main reason why I won't say that name out loud because it's hard to say. Um, did really well. Like it was a potent team in a lot of aspects for a 9-7 record. I honestly, looking at this roster and then seeing you guys win 9-7 is surprising just off that. But yeah, it was a good team.
Yeah, it was
Um,
kind of surprising for us too, to be honest. We went on a late season skid, which the season 10 Phillies also did, but to a much different uh response in the playoffs. But late season skid
yeah,
ended up finding us to 9-7, and yeah, it was a very potent team. Both on activity and in scouting and in the results on the stat sheet. Super super potent team. A lot of really good people on that team. Honestly, one of the most fun teams I've been around. Just so many people that were active, everyone was engaged. It felt easy. almost to be part of that team. Except when we started losing, then it didn't feel easy. But
For sure.
it was nice to have everyone. It was like I didn't need to try to get everyone on the same page. Everyone was just on the same page from the jump. And yeah, as of recording, we are currently during the season 10 Paper Cup that Philly is currently involved in. So uh, clearly, they've recovered from the wild card round loss of season 9. Um, and yeah, pulling for that group of people to go on and win that title, even despite of reasons of season 10's playoff run that we will get to when we get to next season.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've got the game on myself. Looks like as we speak, it is 3-2 with Tampa up at the current moment off of a very fun string of events of at bats. But that's for another day when it's concluded. So yeah, you head to Atlanta this next season. So you're coming back home. You have a bigger role. Um, you're captain for the team. If I remember correctly, you were a bigger part of that draft class in regards to the team aspect to the draft room. Um, you got Lars Nootbaar. I can't remember if that was his first year as GM or
Yes, this is his
I know
first
it's
year as
relatively
GM.
recent. I thought so. But yeah, you returned to what the fuck is a kilometer stadium.
Well,
And
first off, let me tell
you
the story of how I got to Atlanta, because I think that
for sure.
shines a light on the situation more than the roster sheet can illustrate the situation. So, the season
Absolutely.
9 Atlanta Braves looked significantly different from the season 10 Atlanta Braves. Six people of the 19 people on the roster, including the GM, stayed. No one from the front office stayed. It was an entire overhaul of the roster, pretty much. A whole new GM team came in. Bars was the primary. They ended up signing Kurt, Penny Lane, who became the co-GM. Myself and Sky McDowell were the other two captains that ended up signing there. Um, Between that, as well as a couple other signings, as well as a fairly large draft class, saw a very like built from the ground up roster, which for me was the reason why I went to Atlanta. Not only did I want to go back to Atlanta to sort of rectify the my personal feelings of not leaving there on such a great note and wanting to fix the mistakes of 4 years ago me. I also saw this as a rebuild to the extent that I had never really been a part of and wanted to see if I could really contribute to something, a project of that scale. Uh, I mean, season 8 there was a fair amount of rebuilding, but nothing to this extent where you were really like tearing off the floorboards almost and building an entire team almost from the foundation up in one off season and trying to build out from there. Lars and Kurt ended up pitching me what their vision for the roster was, and I wanted to help them build it. And honestly, I came into the season thinking, hey, I'm going to come in, I'll mentor the rookies, I'll help them build a nice, stable foundation. And then after the season, they'll have a high draft pick. They can come bring in another high caliber activity person, and then they can start building from there. That's not how the season went. About the middle of the season, that was kind of how the season was going. And then session 11, I believe it was session 11, either session 11 or session 10, when we played Philly the first time, was kind of when we started to find form because we'd beaten, at that point, I think it was only a one lost Philly team. And then we started to pick it up. We shared one win together, and the next, and the next. And then suddenly it comes to week 6 or session 16, and we have to play Philly again for the chance to actually make the playoffs, which somehow, despite the fact that my last full season in Atlanta, season 5, we were eliminated from the playoffs in session 16. So I was afraid that all of this was just going to end the same way as my last season. And then we walk off week 16 to make the playoffs and then go on a run through the wild card and LDS. make an NLCS run, the farthest run that the Braves franchise has had since they were the Expos back in season 3 when they made the Paper Cup, as not the Braves in season 3. Had to emphasize that point, and yeah, make it to the NLCS where we have to play the Phillies again. So I have to play the team that I had just gone from in season 9 that I really enjoyed and that I knew just how much of the same page they were on, and had to play them 3 times. Honestly, I'm kind of glad that we beat them twice. I would have preferred if we won in the NLCS, one of those games. I would have liked to make another paper cup. That would have been fun. But as a lot of the people, especially because I think a lot of the rookies are going to listen to this podcast, as a lot of you rookies will come to find out, trying to beat the same team 3 times, not easy. Designed to be difficult. Because at a certain point, they start to figure out what you're doing. You probably won't have a situation where you play the same team 3 times. But I will tell you from personal experience, it's really not easy. So try not to do that. But yeah, ended up losing that NLCS this year to Philly to get them to the Paper Cup that's currently going on right now. So, despite my personal emotions about losing that game and it still being kind of fresh as we're recording, I still want them to win, begrudgingly, kind of, but not really because they're still my friends. But also, you know, I don't like losing. So,
No, I get it. We ironically, you guys are NL East. I'm from the AL West. We were a similar boat. We finished 9-7 as Oakland Athletics. Went on a 5-game win streak, led by a couple great games of pitching, a couple great games of hitting. Um, then have it all fall apart in the division series um, against Tampa, who is also currently in the Cup. So
okay,
not
so we
quite the
we
same.
feel
It's not my own
similarly
team.
about the teams currently in the game, though I have a bit more
Yeah,
intimate
yeah.
understanding of how the Phillies work than you do of the Rays.
Oh, I have very little understanding of the Rays. I spent most of that last game in the Rays clubhouse, um, just kind of watching. It was a rough game, but that's kind of where we're both at. We are both leaving our teams, um, different reasons, but we're both leaving our teams. Um, I know, I assume you might be looking to free agency now. I think I already have my destination picked out as of recording. But I think with that, even though we finished the season recaps, I'd like to still ask a couple questions, especially get into rapid fire, even if this is a podcast format that are, um, at least the fans of my interviews that have read it
I mean,
are
that's your
familiar
signature
with.
segment. You
It's a
can't
little,
not bring the signature segment in. That's kind of the
yeah,
recognizable piece of the format. You can't not have the
yeah.
format. You gotta stick to the format. Even if we're talking instead of writing it down, it's still the format. You gotta ask me the questions.
Oh, for sure. So I guess you're not a rookie, but let's touch on a couple things that we haven't touched on. We already did the recaps of the seasons, kind of talked about that. Your one paper cup win, couple demises, unfortunately, but overall, uh, a fun and eventful journeyman career. Let's talk about the man behind the bee. What hobbies are you?
Hobbies, I spend a lot of time watching sports. I'm a big sports guy. Uh, I'll pretty much watch whatever team sport is on, between baseball, football, soccer, hockey, basketball. Uh, I am a die-hard Florida Panthers fan when it comes to hockey because I grew up a couple miles away from where their home stadium is. And so, if you know anything about hockey, particularly the Florida Panthers, um, not a great history, but this past year we won a cup for the first time ever. So I am riding high off of that cup win. It may or may not have buoyed my mental health through the summer. But yeah, sports is sort of a big thing for me. I'll dabble in some video games every once in a while. Not super much of a gamer, but I'll dabble. Uh, when I watch TV, uh, I do Model UN at college because I'm still in college. I do Model UN. That's a thing that I am very invested in. So, in the off chance that any of you happen to also do Model UN, let me know. We can talk shop. Or if you just need a hobbyist diplomat, let me know.
No, I can definitely understand that, and that's something I've been seeing MLR joke a bit more about with Model UN. Obviously, a lot of our bigger members are still college students. Damon, shout out to our alum. I know is working on. I are they in their master's doctorate yet? I know
I
they're getting
believe they're
through there.
still in the master's
They're working
program.
hard.
Shout out Dayman.
I couldn't remember. I know
Again,
they're yeah. Shout out Damon. That's hard. Being a alum, doing all that. In regards to sports, I'm a White Sox fan, so trust me, I know pain. So I get it with the Panthers. Different sport, but I know the pain. I would wish we could have capitalized on our good team a few years ago and actually won something, but at least your Panthers got something.
yeah.
I guess
Here's hoping we can
to
like
kind of
keep
jump
it
in,
together.
yeah. I guess I can kind of jump into this next one. I usually touch on kind of how the rookies are feeling about FCB and the players around them. And I think here it's just kind of a general question of how are you feeling about MLR in its current state, and are there any players that kind of stand out to you? Um, you just kind of want to talk about either the impact that they're making on the league, or just like the person.
That's a very hard question, Joel. I hope you understand that that is just such a hard question for me because I have played on six, maybe seven, depending on how you count teams. So it's a lot of teams, a lot of people I've played with. Also, if you include the other league where I'm also a journeyman, I played for like 11 different teams. So it's a lot of people that I've known, a lot of people that I've interacted with in the community, a lot of people that I really enjoy. So, to ensure that I don't accidentally upset any of my friends by not naming them in the list of people, I'm not gonna name anyone specific. Um, but just generally, all y'all are great. Love y'all. You guys are the reason why I'm still here after 4.5 years of this nonsense. Almost five at this point. Jesus Christ. 5 years. That's too many years. But yeah,
Trust me, I
MLR is great. We've definitely been through our rocky patches. Um, I could spend
yeah,
another hour talking about the various controversies I have lived through in my career, but there's no reason to get into any of that. We're trying to have a nice, fun, positive podcast. Um, but
yeah. That's
yeah, I think
that's another podcast.
that is definitely another podcast. Maybe not even a podcast that should ever air, but that's definitely a different podcast. But yeah, I
For
think
sure.
as it is
Uh,
right now, I think MLR is in a really good spot, and I'm still glad to be kicking around. And yeah, looking forward to playing with another group of people.
Definitely. Um, I talk more on destinations, but I'm pretty certain you don't fully have that figured out yet.
I do not.
Um, and I guess kind of on my end, I'm fully happy to say I would put Mr. Mark Shin as one of my favorite MLR players because I don't mind upsetting people. But uh, I like most of my Oakland teammates. I like a good amount of people. Street Lamp, all of them are Loms. We've already talked about them. As much as I poke at Thomas, I like Thomas. Um, so,
I'm gonna
I
take you
agree. And
mentioning Mark Skinny. It's pronounced Skinny. I know it's spelled weird. It's actually like a Mark
oh,
Burley joke.
oh, I know.
Uh,
I'm still gonna pronounce it Shin.
but yeah, me and Mark Skinny are pretty good friends. Back in MLN, back when I used to GM, he was like the right hand for my GMing over. For those of you familiar with MLN, the Portland Pioneers. Shout out Pios, pronounced Pios. Um, I don't want them to win right now because I'm in a team in their division, but shout out them. Shout out Mark, real good guy. Since you brought him up, I'm gonna shout him out specifically, and no one else, because again, don't want to upset people. Again, like
I
I
could talk.
said, hobbyist diplomat. I'm trying to be diplomatic.
Oh no, I don't diplomat on the Joel Justice show, whatever you want to call this weird thing. Um, I gotta just go with what I think works. I like Mark. He is a big aspect of what made this year fun. Um, so that's kind of my own personal shout out, just as a response to you talking about it being in a good place. Because I agree. Honestly, in regards to controversy, it's been very little this year, which has been great. I know there was one thing, but we won't touch on that. Um, I guess that kind of leaves the opening for rapid fire questions. Um, as many of you know, it's our fan favorite segment. And to start things off, what's your favorite color?
Aquamarine.
Okay, okay. Favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
Donatello.
If you could only pick one donut to have for the rest of your life, what would it be?
The chocolate covered cream filled donut from Krispy Kreme.
Blasphemy, but understandable. Let's touch on. Yeah, sure. Let's get into this. Favorite novel?
Favorite novel? The Book Thief.
It's a good one. Favorite episode of The Office?
Not an Office guy. That's my least
Ah,
favorite of the Sureverse shows. Big The Good Place,
that,
man. If
that
we want to talk about The Good Place, we can talk about The Good Place, but not an
I
Office
could
guy.
talk about The Good Place. I could talk about The Good Place all day. I love
If
that
you want to
show.
talk about my
Um,
favorite Good Place episode, that would probably be the season 4 episode where all of the characters are played by Janet. It's
that is
probably
a
my
great
favorite
episode.
episode.
That's a really hard show to talk about past season one without spoiling a huge plot twist.
Right.
So yeah, it's a great show. I guess next rapid fire. What is your favorite?
All right. I'm gonna ask you to repeat the question because your audio cut out for a second.
For sure. What is your favorite baseball glove brand?
Rawlings, easy.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's I believe what I've got at the current moment. Uh,
Every single glove I've
so
ever
you
had
talked
is
about your favorite.
Rawlings.
You already talked about hockey teams. What's your favorite baseball team?
Mets. I know it's weird. I'm from South Florida, so being a Mets fan is weird. But Mets. Love David Wright.
Ah, nah,
Saw him
Met.
play at a World Baseball Classic game in Miami, and been a Mets fan ever since.
Yeah. Besides, if you're from Florida, you don't have much to root for otherwise. Sorry, Miami
Don't
and
get me started on
Tampa.
the Marlins. I will go on a 15-minute rant about why the Marlins organization is not worth rooting for. Sorry, the
Oh, I
five
mean,
Marlins fans.
the D train. That was a highlight for a year. Um,
That's the point.
yeah. Let's favorite episode of Scooby Doo.
I never watched Scooby Doo as a kid growing up. I guess it was just kind of
This is a,
not really something I was a part of as part of my age group.
see. I feel like we're around the same age, and that's all I watched as a kid. Uh,
Then maybe I'm just weird.
gosh.
I think one of
Well,
us
then
is
I
just
guess
weird. I
we.
don't know which of us. We'll find out when this podcast comes out. And people, you know what? If you're listening, if you're this far in the podcast, comment in League News discussion and ping both myself, Ryan Taylor, and Joel Justice, saying whether or not you watched enough Scooby Doo as a kid to have a favorite episode.
My
This is how
favorite
we're going to
episode is
gauge
the
viewer
episode
retention.
where.
We gauge viewer retention by making them respond at this point. We're like 55 minutes in.
Oh, for sure. Just saying, the balloon episode with the ghost. That's the best episode. Um, but I guess to kind of jump through that, let's go to favorite cartoon as a kid.
Favorite cartoon? Phineas and Ferb.
Okay, I can respect that. I watched a good bit of Phineas and Ferb. I don't know if I'd put it up there in like my top five, but it was a good show. Um, favorite band?
Favorite band? Um, Silk Sonic, if you count that as a band. It's a two-person band, but it's a band.
Yeah, that's close enough. Um, okay, favorite song from Silk Sonic?
Oh, mm. Leave the door open. It's an easy answer, but it's the answer.
Favorite college class you currently?
Favorite current college class. Probably time series forecasting. I'm a stats major, so
Okay.
whole lot of numberish classes. I know some people may not be particularly drawn to that part, but I am a scouting guy for a reason. So
All
numbers.
right. Speaking of scouting, and no, I can totally agree. Let's get into a scouting-based question. Deltas or pitch?
Oh, you're making me break my secrets, huh? Um,
It doesn't have to be a C.
Honestly, it depends. My true honest answer is it depends. There is no
Absolutely.
one
I
true
would agree
right
there.
scouting metric, and that is the hill I would die
What are your thoughts on the number 880?
on. Oh, don't get me started on 880. So 880 was a meme that I helped start, or that my team helped start right before I got into FCB. Uh, my Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets were playing the UNC Tar Heels that has actually still have quite a few members of that team still around in the league. Shout out current AL pennant winner GM Hannibal Bly, as well as Street Lamp. Uh, I think I don't know if Simba's still in the league, but he was on that team. A couple other Rays were on that team. Uh, Pretty good UNC team. But yeah, our pitcher at the time, who is in FCB right now, but I don't know if they want to really be acknowledged as the same person. So, out of theoretical respect for that, I will not mention their old player name. But they just kind of kept throwing the old 880 as a pitch to UNC, and it just kept working somehow,
Mhm.
some way. I think it was like 7 or 8 times in a 4 inning game. It was a disproportionate amount of times that 880 was thrown. And we kind of got to a point where we started rubbing it in their face, and we just kind of kept memeing on them even after the game was over through the entire FCP season, to the point where it became a sort of acknowledged by the wider league. So now 880 has become sort of a league-wide meme number as a result of my FCB team from almost 5 years ago. So if someone ever throws 880, that exists because of my old college teammates. So yeah, I will live and die by 880 being the best meme of
I
MLR significance.
could be wrong. I think my first zero diff as a pitcher was against you with me pitching 880. I could be wrong.
That
I think
sounds right. I
that
think
may
I remember playing you in season 8. You were pitching, and I swung 880 because you knew 880 was a meme for me, and we're trying to play off of that by throwing 880, and I zeroed it to you.
yeah, I think that was one of my first home runs that I gave up. One of very many that season.
Sorry,
Um,
not sorry.
it was a good learning experience. I've bounced back. Um, Also, to touch on one of the comments you made during that, Simba is still in the league. Little birdie told me that Simba may be a free agent this year, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
Um,
shout out
but
Simba.
yeah, I could be incorrect. He could have also been on the retirement board. I just remember seeing his name on doing some stuff. But yeah, he's still around. I see his picture every once in a while. I think he frequents I want to say he sometimes frequents the sports cards, but I could be incorrect. It's usually like Zell Contensor and guys like that. Shout out to the card guys. A big part of why I stayed around in the league. for a long time when I just wasn't quite enjoying the actual game side yet. Uh, so yeah, we kind of touched on that. I've got to ask as part of this. It's not really a rapid fire question. We'll get into that last rapid fire question, just because it's something that I just thought of. I forgot to ask. Why a B? Where did that come from? I obviously know you were on the Yellow Jackets, but why a
Okay, so
B?
this was completely separate from the fact that I was on Georgia Tech. This was actually a nickname that was given to me in my first season in MLN. So when I was a rookie, I played for a team called the Ursa Major Grizzlies, and on that team, I was having a pretty good year. I won Rookie of the Year and MVP that year. So pretty solid year, not too bad. And as a result of that season, I got the nickname the Killer Bee because my name, Brian Taylor, starts with a B. And so I just kind of leaned in. And so when I was doing my MVP candidacy or campaigning, I leaned in and I did the whole like MVB BEE like mantra as like a catchphrase to try and get people to vote for me. I didn't need to get people to vote for me. My stats were just that good. I think I had like a 581 batting average.
Wow.
It was quite a year, but nevertheless, after that, I just kind of kept leaning in. After winning the MVP, I just kept going by MVB because I was very proud of that and was sticking to it. And by that point, I sort of gained enough recognition as B outside of not only the clubhouse where I earned the nickname, but just in the wider community, that I just kind of fully leaned into the B gimmick. And so now it has become part of the Brian Taylor persona, if you will.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Well, as much as I get off the rails, because you know what, this is my show, I can. Let's get back to our rapid fire questions with the single most important question. I
The
mean,
most
most
important
people know
question.
it. It it could determine where you end up in free agency. I'm gonna be honest. It honestly, you may end up having to retire if you answer poorly. What's your favorite Spanish novella?
You may not consider this as a Spanish novella. I don't care. It's Don Quixote. That's the best Spanish piece of literature. Full stop. Argue with the wall.
I'm gonna pretend like I know what that is. Uh, so let's move on to the next little segment, which is just touching up on um, anything else you want the rookies or the vets to know about Brian Taylor as a whole that maybe we haven't touched on.
I mean, not really. In the words of NBA champion and MVP Kawhi Leonard, I'm just a fun guy. You know, love to play fake baseball. If you want to get to know me, you just gotta ask me more questions like, ha 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 ha. Insert the Kawhi laugh here.
I think that's a good place to end it. So I'm gonna thank you, Brian Taylor, for sitting down with me for this somewhat sporadic conversation. But hopefully our listeners have enjoyed it, and hopefully you enjoyed sitting down and talking with me.
I sure did. I apologize to the listeners for having to listen to me consistently ramble for now solidly over the hour mark. I apologize, but that's just kind of how I talk, both in writing and in listening. That's just kind of how I am. If you don't like it, then I'm sorry, but that's just kind of me. I can't turn it off. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you enjoyed, Joel. And I look forward to hopefully hearing more podcasts with you interviewing, or at the very least, reading more interviews from you and the rookies and the vets and creating more media, which is something I really enjoy and want to see more of. So, yeah, media good.
I agree. Well, this has been Rambling with Joel, and this has been the B. See you next time.
So, yeah.